Thank you for joining Ghatika Monthly, everyone. This is our monthly educational offering through the CCR. Today we're doing online only because Timo, our teacher, is joining us from Europe. I believe he's in the Netherlands right now. Um, I'm just going to open with a few words about the CCR and then hand it over to Timo. So we are a nonprofit organization that is looking to bring contemplative practice into greater access and proliferation in the world because we know that a lot of our problems, maybe most of our problems, stem from imbalances in the mind, and those kind of fan out into the world in ways that are not beneficial to us or to others. And so through mind training, we can bring greater mental balance. And when we cultivate our minds, we enable greater well-being for ourselves and for everyone we touch. So you'll see us developing and sharing these contemplative methods through a few domains. We have three domains of impact: mind labs, research, and education. And our mind labs are physical centers. Our headquarters is in Crestone, Colorado, where we have a hermitage that has 14 people in full-time retreat at any given time, advancing in deep meditation practice in a way that really informs all of our learning, what is possible through contemplative practice. Long-term retreat is definitely not for everyone, right now, but all of us can learn from the insights that come from devoting such dedicated time to this kind of work that involves, fully pulling back from worldly life and going inward and applying methodologies that are well developed about how to spend time in intensive meditation practice. So that's what these people are doing and have been training for a long time. And so many of them are participating in research, which is our second domain, in which we use really established empirical approaches to help measure the impacts of contemplative practice and expand knowledge in the very much growing field of contemplative science. And our third domain is education, where we offer modes of learning, versions of contemplative practice, and technology. So this series is part of that, where we like to introduce a variety of teachers and their styles to our community, and they have various backgrounds in hopes that their perspectives will resonate with a lot of different people. So um, we have more formal curriculum offerings as well. Today, we're welcoming Timo Pieters as a teacher who recently graduated from a teacher training we offered to educators. And that was teaching the framework that really guides all of our educational curricula, which is called the Sixfold Matrix of Mental Balance. And this framework explores six domains of mental balance and imbalance and the ways that contemplative interventions can kind of help us train the intelligence that brings balance in those domains. So in the coming years, we'll be expanding that curriculum into different forums. And Timo, as a recent graduate of that, is versed in that now and also has an extensive background prior to that in contemplative study and practice. He has an academic background in religious studies, and he has his own organization called Integral Wellbeing, which we'll share a link to, where he teaches a variety of practices that support leading a life conducive to flourishing. So I'm really delighted to welcome Timo to teach today. I will mention that CCR is a donor-supported organization. We're offering these teachings freely because we don't want there to be barriers to this kind of wisdom. But if you feel moved to support our work, you can do so through a link that Griffin will share in the chat to help us kind of share these transformative practices far and wide. So with that, I'll hand it over to Timo. Welcome, Timo.
Hello, everybody. How's the sound? Is it okay? Everybody hear me good? Wonderful. It's wonderful to see so many people joining and some cameras open, some cameras closed. That's great. If you want to open your camera, it would be very nice. I would love to see your faces as well, but feel free to keep it closed if that makes you more comfortable. So, yeah, it's really delightful to kind of be guiding or, facilitating a session like this. I've watched many of them on YouTube, but it's the first time being asked to lead this here. So it's really wonderful privilege for me, being a longtime student of Lama Allen in particular. It's been very formative influence in my life, personally and professionally. And yeah, the Sixfold Matrix teacher training was really sort of a culmination of that whole process. For those of you who are less familiar with it, it's what I appreciate about it in particular is the more secular, not necessarily secular, but very universally applicable nature of it. Whatever your particular background is, worldview wise, culture wise, you'll be able to recognize things in this matrix, I think. And that makes it so easy to spread in a lot of different contexts. So in the future, it'd be wonderful to, bring this into education and so forth. Um, and so what I'll be sharing with you, some of these themes I'll be talking about today are more coming from a Buddhist background, but I'll be sharing them, I hope, in a way that is accessible to all of you, even if you're not necessarily Buddhist or have no interest in being a Buddhist. I think the themes we're going to explore together are very universal in the same way. These are just perennial existential themes for human beings. And so, for those of you who saw the announcement, the whole topic of suffering and dissatisfaction and what are really the roots of that. Yeah. So, in the Buddhist context, this whole topic is often called developing the determination to be free. In Tibetan, nejung, nejung, which literally means to definitely emerge. And personally, that's always been a very beautiful metaphor, actually, because the image that's being invoked here is almost as if we are in our lives a lot of the time somewhat submerged in an ocean. We're being washed around by waves of, disturbing emotions and compulsive impulses to act, and a lot of time not feeling very in control of our lives. And so this determination to be free, this impulse to definitely emerge, is all about, can we wake up from this slumber and emerge into sort of reaching dry land, reaching the other shore where we have some more safety and not just being washed around in the ocean of suffering. And so the theme of this determination to be free was what I spent about 2.5 months meditating on in Tuscany, Italy. I was there in retreat recently, came out 2 months ago or so, and it's still, it was a bit of a transition, I have to say. 2.5 months was the longest I'd done so far, almost entirely silent retreat, almost entirely solitary. It was very challenging, but I can assure you that meditating on suffering for 2.5 months is not as depressing as it sounds. It's it has its function, and surprisingly, many of the meditations felt very liberating. Um, Actually, precisely because the more you look into it, the more you observe your own mind, and you observe how the suffering that you experience and the dissatisfaction is kind of shaped by your own mind, by what your mind is doing. The more you start to see that, the more there's also an opportunity to say, okay, what can I do differently to actually suffer less? That strangely, I have more agency about this than I initially thought. And so that whole process was quite fascinating, I have to say, and it's still very active, coming back into normal life where you're engaged in the world again, and job searching and whatever else, and all the usual things you have to do again. And so maybe to start off with, just to take a moment maybe to connect with what is our motivation for even being here tonight. That we saw an announcement and thought, oh, that sounds wonderful, meditation. Let me join that. And what was the impulse there in terms of what would we like to maybe experience a little bit less of, and what would we like to experience more of? Sense of kind of an impulse to experience more satisfaction, maybe some more fulfillment. maybe a little bit less unnecessary suffering. Why not? And how tender in a way it is that we all have that. We all have that same drive. We can't seem to really turn it off, can we? We don't want to suffer. It's just baked in. I haven't met anybody who likes to suffer. We want to be happy. We're looking for fulfillment all the time. And it was one of the things that really stuck out to me in my retreat, seeing how every little thing I was doing in my life, every little action, every little project, it was always an attempt to find something, to find some kind of satisfaction or some kind of more lasting happiness, and kind of failing a lot of the time. I fail a lot with this. Maybe you are doing better than me. you know it's so difficult. We try to find happiness, and we succeed sometimes. It lasts for a little while, usually much shorter than we anticipated, and then it sort of goes again, and we have to look again. We had a nice experience, that was good, that was wonderful, and then it comes to an end, and we slowly, what do I want now? And that whole dance that we do, and how much energy it takes to be always on the search, on the hunt for that perfect experience, and often being disappointed. I'm speaking for myself, of course. Yeah, how tender that is. And so it's beautiful, for me, one of the most touching aspects of the Buddhist tradition is actually the story of the Buddha's own life, who was clearly, as far as we know, he had a life that was pretty sheltered from suffering in many ways. You know, he grew up in as a prince in ancient India, in a palace, multiple palaces, in fact, a summer palace and a winter palace, and you would spend that time there in lots of luxury, and every need he had was attended to. We even have some early texts where he sort of describes this. And I was enjoying myself to the utmost. He was having a great time. And yet, around the age that I am now, funny enough, about 29 or 30 or so, it's just becoming more and more aware of, yeah, but all this hedonic pleasure, you know, all the different varieties, all the senses stimulated all the time. And yet he realized, I am just like everybody else. I'm aging. I am going to get sick, inevitably. Even though I'm a prince, I will get sick. Everybody will get sick. And I'm going to die. Unavoidably. Completely unavoidable. Not only that, but even the pleasures that I seek all the time, those too age. Those too fall apart and deteriorate. Those too, in a sense, die. And how interesting to see that parallel. You know, our pleasures and the causes of our pleasures, they also disintegrate, slowly wither away and pass, in a sense. And so, more and more, he was starting to look for a source of fulfillment that was not subject to that kind of decay, that wasn't so dependent on something fleeting. And in a way, that is what led him to leave the palace. And according to the earliest accounts, in a way, the people who were near him were not very happy about this. He describes that his parents and his wife were crying. He was shaving off his beautiful long black hair and taking the robe and going into the forest. Oh, wow, why is he doing this? But he had this existential difficulty. He saw something about our existence that he felt many people couldn't see. And so he went off for 6 years, trying so many different ways, studying with teachers, other teachers of his time, great meditation masters who thought they had found a true source of lasting fulfillment. And then studying with them for a long time, progressing, and then also realizing even this is not it. Even the deep meditative states that he would get into, those too would end. And so then the story goes, after about 6 years, he had his major breakthrough, of course, which is when they started calling him the Buddha, awakened one, as a title, because he had a big breakthrough. But the breakthrough was so intense, he actually didn't talk for 7 weeks, which is often, I think, left out of the story. It's very interesting. Imagine that you have such a powerful meditative experience that you can't talk for 7 weeks because you just think, nobody's going to understand this. Nobody's going to fathom what I'm talking about. But then, of course, slowly he started speaking because he was there with some friends. Luckily, he had 5 friends that he had gone into the forest with, that he was meditating with, and they were asking him, come on, you look so serene. What's going on with you? Tell us what you're experiencing. And so that's when he gave his famous first teaching, often called on the Four Noble Truths. But I think that the term Four Noble Truths has this kind of unfortunate feeling about it, that what he was proclaiming was just another thing to believe in. I think that's a very common way of understanding that. But actually, you could argue what he was saying was that he was pointing to 4 realities, realities of life, existential realities for ourselves to look at and experience, and then to do something about, not a truth to accept in a way. So a popular translation of that text calls it the 4 realities for spiritually ennobled ones, instead of 4 noble truths. 4 realities that are seen by spiritually noble beings. They see these realities for what they are. That's what he's saying. And many of us, we fail to see the subtlety of this, and we are confused about where to find more lasting happiness. And so the first reality that he was talking about is kind of what I started with at the beginning. This reality of sometimes called suffering, but actually unsatisfactory experiences. It's more accurate, dukkha in Sanskrit. Dukkha is not just suffering. He was saying that even the happiness that we experience most of the time is often unsatisfying. Very interesting. What we think of as happiness is also unsatisfactory. But why is the question. We will get to that. And thirdly, and even more subtle observation that I think in all of my studies of contemplative traditions in university and outside, I've never really seen any other great teacher in history talk about this level. It's very subtle, the unsatisfactoriness of conditioning, is what he called it. And that is that even when we don't experience suffering, and we're also not really experiencing happiness, but we're kind of in the middle. We're kind of experiencing just neutral feeling, Vedana, neutral feeling. What we're experiencing is neither pleasant nor unpleasant, just kind of zero, neutral, in the middle. And many teachers in his day were arguing that that is liberation. If you go deep enough into concentration practice, deep meditation, as some of the yogis at the CCR are doing, training their attention skills very profoundly, very deeply, you can go so deep that you don't experience unpleasant feeling, but there's also not really any bliss happening anymore. It's just sort of neutral. But the Buddha realized that even though you may get into a state like that, and it can be wonderful, it is also not lasting. Because sooner or later, you're going to have to get up and go to the toilet. You're going to have to get out of your meditation. You can't stay there forever. Even that neutral feeling is not a kind of true refuge. And so, even more profoundly, there's something about the kind of body and mind that we have that makes us prone to suffering and to unsatisfying happiness. That the kind of happiness that we can get through our senses, for example, is by definition transitory. If I eat something, the taste will only last so long. That's a limitation of my body. I can't have a permanent pleasant taste. And similarly with my mind, I can't hold on to an emotion forever and keep experiencing that because my body and mind themselves are changing all the time, every moment. And that makes it impossible to cling to things. That was also what he was talking about with this deeper sense of the unsatisfactoriness of being conditioned. Just simply that. But of course, you might say, well, the Buddha himself, he also had a changing body and mind. He had the same limitation as me. But if he was saying that he was experiencing a more lasting fulfillment, then what's so different about him and all the many other yogis after him who claim to have experienced the same thing? And there he was saying that the problem is actually not that our experiences are transitory. I like that somebody laughed. I agree. It's not just that they're transitory, it's that we cling to them. You know, if we could simply accept it and see it for what it is, yeah, this pleasure's nice, but it's not going to last. And that's okay. I won't try to cling to it as if I could hold on to it. And similarly, something a little bit uncomfortable in the body doesn't have to make me suffer, you know? And so we're also conditioned by self-grasping. And that, for the Buddha, in a nutshell, was really the root of why we experience so much suffering and dissatisfaction. That we filter every experience through me and my preferences, my particular kind of rigid preferences that most of us have. And so I'm sort of curious as I'm saying all these things to hear how this is landing with all of you. Like, what is this stirring up for you? Any comments you have, associations you have? Feel free to unmute yourself, or you can use the raise your hand. Feel free to do that anytime. I
Oh,
think for myself, please.
yeah, Susan Wildwood here. I find this uh, erratic condition to be disorienting because it comes to an end generally rather suddenly, whether
Mm,
it's the suffering or the pleasure, and I get caught off guard. And that's where I'm reminded that I'm clinging to something.
mm, yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. Yeah. It is remarkable how quickly it ends, right? One of the practices I did quite a bit in retreat is actually to either remember a pleasurable experience or actually sort of have one on purpose, but with full awareness, like completely being totally mindful and aware of the progression of it. Like I put on a piece of music and I'm listening, I'm feeling the enjoyment, and it's sort of up and down and it shifts as the song progresses, and then slowly the song comes to an end and it stops, and there's a little ebbing away and it's gone. Almost that it doesn't leave a trace. Kind of remarkable. But then, if I, like you said, Susan, if I have this tendency to, but I want it to last a little bit longer, then I'm in trouble because it ended. I could put on another song and that might work. Oh, I like this one too. Okay, let me listen to this song for a bit. And then that song is over. And how long are you going to listen to songs? You know? So that's another observation that we find in the teachings about this, that not only do these pleasures not really last, but they often, they don't actually satisfy in a more lasting way. That if you kept simply experiencing the same kind of thing that you find pleasant, it slowly becomes a source of discomfort. You know, I might have a favorite song and I like listening to it, but if I had to listen to it for 12 hours straight, I don't think I would find it that pleasant anymore. In fact, in some uh, horrible places, they use it as a torture method, play the same song all over again for many, many hours. It's not so nice. Eating ice cream is nice, but if I have to eat 3 kilograms of ice cream, in one sitting, it's not going to be very pleasant. And so, as His Holiness Dalai Lama, in one of his more recent books, where he explains this, The Library of Wisdom and Compassion, highly recommend it for those of you who are interested. In 10 volumes, it's amazing. I used it for my retreat personally. In volume 2, he talks about this, that if ice cream, for example, was a true cause of happiness, the more I would eat, the happier I would get. That's what it means for something to be a cause. If it's a real cause of happiness, the more I get, the happier I'll be. And yet, with most things, at least in my experience, it's not like that. It's not that more is better. And so, again, feel free if anybody wants to chime in on this. I'm curious to hear what you're thinking of in your own life with this. I think many of us think the cause of my unhappiness, for example, it must be external. It must be, I felt unhappy when my boss said something to me. So it must be, my boss must be the cause of my unhappiness, and vice versa. I felt happy when I watched that movie. The movie was the cause of my happiness. And it makes sense to think in that way. It's sort of intuitive. But again, if that were true, if that movie was inherently, by itself, capable of making me happy, then the more I watch that movie, the happier I would get. And yet we don't really experience it that way. And so in Buddhism, these are called the 8 transitory concerns. The way we usually use to find happiness is external. Lama Allen calls it hedonia, hedonic happiness. It comes from an external stimulus. Hedonia. We usually seek happiness through sensory pleasures, for example, or wealth, material wealth. Or we seek to have a good reputation, or we want to receive praise from people. Because often when those things happen, we have experienced some pleasure. But then it doesn't last. And so again, we're sort of stuck. And on the flip side, we have examples, great masters from many traditions, not just the Buddhist one, where we have people who seem to have almost nothing externally, and yet they are remarkably happy people. Right? I'm sure you can think of an example, maybe even in your own life, somebody you've heard of, somebody you met maybe. For me, the primary example is one of my teachers, Garchen Rinpoche, the Tibetan master. He spent about 20 years of his life in a communist concentration camp. After the Chinese invaded Tibet, they rounded up all the high lamas and put them together in the same jail. And he was one of them. And in this lama's jail, I will spare you the details because it's almost impossible to read about it. It's so horrifying the way they treated these people. And he was there for a long time, and for a long time, as he writes in his biography, he was angry. He was angry at the Chinese. He's very open about that. For taking over his homeland, for trying to destroy this beautiful tradition that he loved. And he was stuck. He couldn't change his circumstances. He had none of the external pleasures and all of the external pains. Hunger, beatings, reputation destroyed, you name it. And yet, at some point, because he met a wonderful teacher, Khenpo Munsel, he realized that he could turn it around for himself. That he wasn't at the mercy of his external circumstances. And so he used that time, that 20 years, to actually cultivate his mind very seriously, in a very disciplined way, mainly practicing loving kindness and compassion towards the people who were torturing him. If you can imagine that, it's hard for us to even conceive of that. And then you see footage of him, There's a wonderful documentary about his life for the benefit of all beings, which is you can find on YouTube since recently. You see this man and you see this is one of the most happy people I've ever seen in my life. He's so joyful and playful and bubbly. You would think he would have such PTSD, he could barely get through the day, but no, he's just, more joyful than most of us. How would that be possible if it was really true that you need external pleasures to be happy and that physical privation, physically difficult circumstances necessarily make you suffer? At some point, he said, I was very happy being in that prison. I didn't mind. They could do whatever they wanted to me, and I was not going to let them make me unhappy. And there are many more examples like that. Famously, Lama Allen's teacher, Yangtang Rinpoche, a similar story. He often said, I was more happy inside that prison than most people are outside. And of course, that was because they were profoundly training and cultivating their mind, changing how they were experiencing what they were experiencing. Not necessarily what they were experiencing, but how they were experiencing. And so in our meditation that we can do in a little bit, we can sort of experiment with that a little bit to sort of bring us back to times when we experienced some unhappiness or a time of experiencing some happiness, and then seeing what was going on externally and what was going on in our mind, the state of mind we were in, and how does that relate to each other. The reason that this is so important, I think, to meditate on this, to actually observe suffering and also our dissatisfaction rather than turning away from it, is because when we see the nature of it, when we see that it's something that comes and goes, it's something that changes, it's something that has a cause, then it's also potentially possible to become free of it. And that's, in a way, a very radical message that I think most of the contemplative traditions of the world have given us. That it's not, our fate is not sealed. It's not necessary to experience life as mostly unsatisfying. It's actually optional if we know how to be with our mind. But of course, that's easier said than done. As I found out in my retreat, 2.5 months being by yourself is not the easiest thing in the world, I can assure you. But it really was true. As long as my basic needs were met, it was, to a large extent, it was my mind. It was just a state that my mind was in, how I was interpreting situations that was determining my happiness. And so maybe we can take a moment to actually do some meditation. If you have a comfortable posture nearby, a little space to sit, most importantly, just to have your spine roughly straight, roughly erect, not rigid, but simply upright is good enough. And so that you won't be uncomfortable. Your knees and your ankles. So then once you've found your favorite posture, let's begin by tuning into the most meaningful motivation that we can bring to this practice. Let's really investigate the nature of our suffering and our dissatisfaction to see if it's possible to be free of them, so that we can also help others come free from their unnecessary suffering. And with that, I invite you to become aware of the natural sensations, breathing in your body, tactile sensations that change as you breathe. The movements of your abdomen. And with every natural exhale, releasing any unnecessary tension in your body and mind. Releasing tension in your eyebrows, your eyes, your jaw, your shoulders, your abdomen. And as you settle into yourself, see if you can bring to mind a situation in your recent past where you were experiencing some suffering, some unhappiness, not too intense. Maybe from last week. And as you bring this situation to mind, see if you can very vividly imagine that scene that you were in. What was going on? Most importantly, what were you feeling? That feeling of unpleasantness. See if you can notice if there's a tendency to pull back from that. Not want to look at that too closely because it's painful. That arises, can bring a sense of curiosity to it. Why did I feel that way? As you relive that experience. As you attend to the situation, see if you can become particularly aware what was going on in your mind. How were you perceiving the situation? See if you can recognize any of these mental processes. Were you trying to hold on to an experience that was ending? Were you focusing strongly on the negative qualities of something while kind of ignoring or overlooking its positive qualities? And also pay particular attention to your sense of self in that moment. When you were feeling unpleasant, what was the sense of self like? Did it feel fixed and unchanging? Something solid? As though you were totally separate from what you were experiencing? check if any of those were present. And then see if you can bring a sense of self-compassion to your own experience. That you had to experience this difficult feeling. Sense of, may I be free from this suffering. And then as you let the scene fade back, just resting in your present state of mind, whatever you're feeling at the moment. As you attend to the mental state you're in, see if you can gradually become aware of the space of awareness within which this feeling is arising. Almost like stepping back a little bit, becoming aware of the canvas that the colors are painted on. And this space of awareness is not something you need to focus on in a very directed way. Rather, by relaxing the direction of your attention, it becomes more open. You can leave it very spacious. You can leave it undirected. Quite effortless. can simply remain aware of being aware. Simply rest as that awareness that is like the sky. The clouds of thoughts and emotions can move through it. They don't disturb the sky. By remaining still in your own place. You won't get pulled into the contents of awareness. Just rest as that space of awareness itself. And as you attend to this space of awareness, see if you can notice, is this awareness itself, does it feel unpleasant? Unpleasant feelings may arise within this awareness. Does awareness itself ever feel unpleasant, unhappy? Does this space of pure awareness get attached to some experiences? Does awareness itself cling to things? Or is that clinging something that arises in that awareness? If you can observe very closely. Don't think about it. Just observe. And finally, does this awareness itself ever push any experiences away with aversion or anger? Or is that aversion rather something that arises in that awareness, but is not itself awareness? Does awareness itself ever reject anything? If you can observe. So then, as we slowly bring our session to a close, let's dedicate whatever positive qualities that we've developed through this practice, that it might enable us to awaken to our full potential in order to be of lasting value to every living being without exception. Help them also awaken to their full potential. May the supreme bodhicitta that has not yet grown begin to grow, and that which has begun to grow may it increase unceasingly for the welfare of sentient beings. Thank you. Okay. So I'm curious to check in with people. Do people feel it would be nice to have maybe a 5 minute little break, or how's people's energy level? Maybe thumbs up if you feel like you can continue. Seeing a lot of thumbs. Okay. Sounds good. So feel free to open your microphone if you like. Anyone would like to share what it was like for them to do this? Anything at all that came up for you? Christine, hi.
Hello. Thank you. I really, really enjoyed that meditation, to be honest. And it's incredibly important, and it's becoming the main focus. It is the main focus, I think, of what we're doing. But what I was thinking, because I'm not used to doing this meditation quite the way you've done this, is this awareness, and like awareness of awareness. That's a difficult concept for me. And I'm just thinking, is that awareness, is that me, that inherent me? Or is, because it changes, doesn't it? The awareness moves. That's the thing I was thinking about when I kind of was trying to back off into how I'm aware of how I'm feeling and how my body is reacting, just to be aware. And the body, the awareness isn't reacting, it's just aware. That's how I experienced it anyway. But is that just the mind, or is it just is it another level of the mind? This is, I've never done this meditation quite like that, to kind of come away, more or less go in meditations I do. So I just see what you've got to say about that.
That's very interesting. Thank you for that. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, it's awareness is fascinating in a way in how subtle it is, right?
Yeah.
It's this, like you said, just this sense of being aware of what's going on. And when I was doing that practice myself, I just sort of felt that it's almost like, in the same way that physical space doesn't really interfere with the things that occupy that space, you know, when I tune into that spacious awareness, it itself doesn't feel reactive. And yet I can have reactivity going on. But to notice if it is something that obscures that awareness, is something that is a content, something that is arising in that field, or is it the field? Is it that space, or is it arising in that space? And that's sort of what we were playing with. And so, for example, when you ask about the self, if I bring to mind the sense of me, Timo, that also feels like something quite distinct and discrete. I can feel it sort of here, and it's something arising in that space of just being aware. But that awareness can always look at that. And so that...
Both.
Say more, please.
It's like you say, you can feel the sensations in your body, and you can know what your mind is thinking, and yet you can be aware of both the body and mind within that space. So it's quite hard to explain, actually.
It is.
So is that space? It's like a television set that works and you've got pictures coming up.
Yeah.
But it's like the television set isn't producing the pictures, and yet it is producing the pictures, but the pictures are caused by other things.
Right.
It's a bit,
Right.
that's the closest I can get at the moment because I haven't thought
Right.
about it too much.
I like your analogy. That's a fun one. Yeah. Just to say a few words about this, the last bit of the meditation we were doing was from the book of His Holiness, where he encourages people to meditate on the nature of mind, that the mind, and he has a whole long discussion I won't go into, but that mind is clarity and awareness or cognizance. And this clarity is kind of like what you were describing. He uses the analogy of a mirror. So it may be a bit like a TV set. It can reflect things, it can make appearances arise, and yet it's spacious. It's this ungraspable, immaterial thing, this field, and yet it can make things arise and be aware of them. But it is subtle. And so when he describes this in the book, this comes also from the Mahamudra tradition, he sort of says, it's very subtle, so don't feel bad if you don't get it right away. It's very subtle to recognize just awareness and to not get too involved with the contents. But I think you were doing great. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? I think I saw Valeriu. Is that your name? How do I say your name? Oh,
sorry. I was just, I wanted to say that Christine asked the right question. I had the same feeling that it's very complicated to catch the awareness itself without the content of the mind. When I was looking inside my mind, I was looking like at the movie, at that memory, unpleasant feelings. It was appearing like a movie, but the awareness itself was like a projector or a light that was looking at the movie, like something outside the picture.
Perfect. Yeah. Great. That sounds, that's actually an analogy that Dr. Alex Berzet likes to use when he teaches this practice. This is also for those of you who would like to look it up, the Geluk Kagyu Mahamudra tradition. He uses this metaphor of the projector, becoming aware of the projector and not just the movie. And it is very subtle, as you said. What is so fascinating for me about this, the way the Dalai Lama introduced this, is that when you start to see the nature of your own mind, that it is just this capacity to be aware, just this mirror, or like the sky, and that our feelings of unhappiness or temporary happiness, and also our reactions to it, our tendency for clinging or attachment. I want to hold on to my pleasant feeling. I don't want it to change. Or the kind of rejecting, pushing away anything unpleasant. I want to get rid of that. I don't like that. That all of that is a little bit like clouds arising in that sky, in that space. But that the awareness, the sky itself, is never actually affected by it. That is what can be so interesting to experiment with, and to see that there's actually in every moment of our experience a dimension of our mind that isn't suffering and that isn't clinging and isn't rejecting. And that potentially, if we can practice enough, we can learn to become more and more aware of that in our daily life, daily situations. In a moment of suffering, if we can tune into that basic awareness, we can feel that we don't actually need to keep perpetuating necessarily that feeling. That awareness is pure. So of course this will take, time to unpack, and we only have a little bit of time today together. So I appreciate doing the experiment with me. At the moment, I'm, for example, teaching a 12-week course where we have more time to slowly unpack these pieces one at a time. But I hope this was useful to you. If anybody else would like to bring in anything, or please, Janice.
I found it really profound. I want to thank you. I've been in an at-home retreat, and I've been struggling with this a long time held feelings of like a compulsion not to do practice. I'll be sitting in my meditation room, and it's like, no, 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 and I listen to it all the time, and of course that brings up a profound message. So anyway, I did practice, and it hit me like a ton of bricks.
Oh, wow.
And it was just a thought. And I know that's what you're taught from first Dharma class, right? But it hit me so experiential. I really want to thank you.
Oh, wow.
It was just a thought. It was like being in a prison for that moment. So
thank you.
Now of gratitude.
Oh, wow. Thank you for saying that. That's lovely.
Welcome. It was lovely for me too.
I can tell.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
A remark about the mirror. It hit me for the first time ever in a different way what the Dalai Lama may have meant. And that is, for the first time, something clicked. So the mirror has a silvered back, and all we see is a reflection. So we project, and what we see is a reflection that's a reverse image of what we think we see. And it's the awareness is what takes that image and makes it an image we can use. But without that mechanism, we would not understand the image. And maybe that's what I cling to, is that the image is real when it's not real. It's only a projection that hits something and it's reflected back. And so I cling to that as a reality, and it's being aware that that is only an image, where the awareness of awareness comes in for me. Just a flash today.
Interesting. Yeah. Thank you for that. Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Please, Cassandra.
So I have a question that might be a bit silly, but while we were doing the meditation, and then after all the wonderful things people have been sharing, my thought was, okay, if awareness of awareness kind of like, okay, that's the mind, like clarity, cognizance, and so forth, then what is it that creates the grasping? Like, if it's just awareness, then how does the grasping to a self, how does it work? How is it possible that we grasp? I don't know if the question is clear, but I don't understand. Like, it happens to me all the time. I'm grasping all the time, but how does it work?
Yes. I love it. I'm curious if anybody actually has a thought on this from the meditation. What did you experience? Ray, please.
Well, I just thought Cassandra's question, I've been student about Lama Islands now for 16, 17 years or so, on the periphery, way out in the orbit here. But I don't think I've ever heard Cassandra's question asked before. I mean, and it's such a cool question, It's always, okay, awareness is this space and all and its illumination, luminous space, and it illuminates everything that we perceive. But why do we start? We're just in samsara all the time. And I think the only answer I have, and I'm nobody, is just because we're stuck in samsara. That's the sort of the definition. That's what we're doing all the time. But if we knew the answer to that question, we could break it and go away and never do it again.
Yeah.
So great. I just blown away by that question. Great question. So thank you.
Yeah, I agree. That's fun. Actually, maybe it's worth in this moment, rather than thinking, trying to analyze it, maybe actually just becoming aware of that sense of me. Who is asking that question? What is that me in relation to that space of awareness? Feel free to talk if you observe something, but maybe just kind of looking together. What is this me? Is awareness me? First of all? Is this simple, pure awareness me? Does it have any characteristics of a me? Or is the me rather something with a location? Something arising in that field? What do you see? You can even try saying your own name in your mind loudly. Kind of catch your own attention. That me suddenly appears, very clear. Is it an object of awareness or is it awareness itself? Curious what you're seeing, Cassandra, as you're doing this.
Well, I get this feeling like the awareness itself has a meanness about it, like, but that's probably just wrong. But I just get this, I get this feeling like there's like if there's someone aware of the space, and then what is that of me? But maybe it's going a bit too deep into this, and so. But thank you for it. Was very interesting, and it deserves a lot of. I know it's not something you figure out in a. Oh, okay, got it. It doesn't work like that. So I appreciate the how do you say? Yeah, looking into it like that. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else wants to share an observation? Feel free, just to maybe as an experiment to play with. When you feel that you find a sense of me, it almost feels like that awareness is me. It has a kind of me quality. You can then try to tune into what is aware of that. And every time you find something, again, and what is aware of that can be very interesting to try. But curious if anybody else had an observation. Janice, please.
I had a really strong sense of big I, a really egoic I. I'll just use that word. And I really felt it was filled with just all the egoic thoughts that I have, this, that, the other, all, none of them, anything you want to cultivate. But what I really felt was, it was so obvious to me at that moment that it was so separate from the space that it was appearing in, and getting back to that lovely question that man asked about why, I have really felt, so correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know where the egoic self comes from, but I feel like I have this huge egoic self that is there specifically to torture me and to keep me from doing anything of value. And I mean, I'm serious. And that's why what I told you before was so important for me to feel that was just a thought. I don't know where that comes from, but for me, that is so separate from any feelings that I've had that have been, we'll just label them good, happy, beneficial self as well as to others. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Sure does. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Unless anybody else has a final something to bring in, can maybe slowly go to a rounding off. Keep it short and sweet.
Timo, I think I actually have one question, if you don't mind.
Oh, please do.
I have been so it's I love all the places that we went with this, um, with the talk and the practice today, and then it's it almost feels like even as we're going in this direction of kind of like awareness of awareness and kind of getting into that non-dual space at the same time. Of course, we're going to go back into our daily lives and be experiencing things in a more dualistic way and even so there are a lot of really there are always a lot of very difficult sad things happening in the world
Mm.
and people who do really experience suffering in a very profound way. And so it's like even though we have these examples of amazing contemplative teachers who are able to transform their experience of being in terrible living conditions for years or even decades. I wonder like what would your maybe not even advice, but what's your perspective on like yes, that's possible. And you can see the logic going, well, okay, well, it doesn't really matter what anybody does because you can just transform it internally. So it can almost
Mm.
turn into like a victim blaming thing. And I can see the logic going in that way. I think we all have the intuitive sense that that's not right.
Mm.
But so maybe this is kind of a hardball question, but but
Sure.
what would you say? What would you say to what how like what are the guardrails that are appropriate to put up, especially when we're not practicing and saying, no, this is a line that we're not going to cross or anyway, that more of a
Mm.
rambling question. I'm sorry
Mm.
about that, but hopefully
No,
I got it
no,
across.
you did. Just curious about guardrails as to our conduct or as to.
Or yeah, our conduct and then what we hold other people accountable for as well, and how do we hold people accountable, that sort of thing, I
Right,
guess. Yeah.
right. Oh yeah, definitely. You opened Pandora's box. How long do you have? um, Gosh, the first thing that springs to mind, and maybe this is a fun way to respond to this. I spent a few years studying with Dr. Joe Loitzo. He's a psychiatrist and psychotherapist and Buddhist teacher from the US, longtime student of Bob Thurman, if probably many of you are familiar. Um, Wonderful, wonderful teacher, wrote a fantastic book, Sustainable Happiness. Difficult, but amazing, if you want to pick that up. He talked about this, that the practice of mind training, kind of what you're talking about, this transforming adversity into your practice or into the path, that definitely doesn't mean that we can't put up a boundary, for example. Like, we're not doing anybody a favor by letting people behave harmfully. That would be, you know, that would not be a skillful expression of compassion. Compassion can also be, I'm going to stop you there because you are creating problems for yourself and others, and that's not bueno. That's not good. And so I was really glad that he said that because, of course, it's possible to read those things as you should be a doormat almost, just let people do what they're going to do and you can always transform it. But of course, as we all, I think, know and experience in daily life, most of the time you just can't control what people do. You can, you can set appropriate boundaries and so forth, but there's too many people and there's too many afflictions to go around. So the name, I'll post in the chat actually. Thank you, Sid, for the question. Joe Loizzo, it's an Italian name. There you go. So just to say that, unfortunately, we do live in a world where many adverse things happen to us, whether we like it or not. And if we don't have some way of metabolizing that, I'm going to use that word, metabolizing, digesting, and then in such a way that it benefits our growth, then it's going to be really tough to be in the world and grow from being in the world, I think. And yeah, it's not an easy practice. It it takes a while, but I appreciate the question. I think it's a great one. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So then maybe this is a good place to round it off. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. Appreciate the engagement. It was really lively. I love this kind of back and forth at the end. It's really fun. And yeah, I think I saw some people signing up to the newsletter on my website. That's very fun. I'm at the moment teaching a 12-week course, going into some of these themes more step-by-step kind of thing. That's still going for another 6 weeks, and then I'll probably do a second round. If you're potentially interested in that, you'll be notified if you were to sign up for the newsletter. So for those of you who are interested, you could do that. And otherwise, hope to see you in some other context maybe in the future. So nice to meet you all. It was lovely.